It says you're live.
Hi everybody, I'm Nancy Kelly and we are here for our second Facebook Live presentation on behavior and training that helps you be successful with your foster dogs for English Springer Rescue America. Today our topic is introducing dogs, a lesson in listening. Little bit of housekeeping. Just like last time, we want you to submit your questions as you're listening to the presentation. We're going to do this in 3 parts, just like last time. So as you think of questions, submit them in the comments. We have a team available to compile the questions and present them so that we can have a question and answer session after each section. So our first section is an overview of introducing dogs and what's important. The second section is about the behaviors that we look for when we're introducing dogs. And the third section is going to be some ideas for setting up situations and getting that job done so that everybody is successful. All right, so are we ready to dive in? So as you think of questions, submit them in the comments. We have a team available to.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started with the overview, the first section. And just go ahead and be submitting your questions in the comments as we go. So the first thing to remember is that we humans have an agenda when we're introducing dogs. In your case, as foster homes for Springer Rescue, you likely have a new foster dog that you want to introduce to your own dogs because it's convenient for you to manage all the dogs together and for them all to get along together in a group, which is great. What we have to remember though is that the dogs don't have an agenda. The good news is we can usually succeed. We can usually get this done and have everything work out great. But we have to ask the dogs what they think throughout the process, and we have to really listen to their answers because that's what helps us make plans for the next steps depending on how they respond. So it also helps to be open to the idea that these dogs may not like each other. Because if you're open to that idea, then that opens your mind to new things to try to succeed along the path to your goal. But you can't force the situation. So we have to remember that dogs don't speak human and humans don't speak dog. We have to rely on reading dogs' behavior to understand what's going on with them. We know that dogs communicate to each other and to us through body language, through the positions that they put themselves in, the way they move around, the way they hold their body parts, their facial expressions, and more. So if you haven't taken the online dog reading course that ESRA offers now, please put that information in the comments and we'll send you a document with the links on it so you can take that course, because it's really the foundation for everything we want to do with introducing dogs, because we have to read what they're trying to tell us. Okay, so I know that you've all introduced dogs before, probably successfully and maybe also unsuccessfully, maybe not, maybe you've always been really good at it. There's all kinds of information online about introducing dogs. There's processes to go through. I've written them, other people have written them, but the thing that's important to remember is that these situations that are suggested are not cookbooks. It's not about you just go through these steps and then you'll win at the end. It's not about that at all. The steps are nothing more than suggested setups in which you can ask dogs the questions that you need to ask them, which are usually, how are you doing, dog? How do you feel about this dog? Are you okay with this dog? And really listen to their answers so you can make a plan for your next step. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of those later, but I want you to remember it's really about reading the dogs. So in the overview, we want to just think about the things that we're trying to accomplish in these setups. First, we want to remove obvious triggers from the situation and circumvent common potential problems that can interfere with our success in introducing dogs. So the first one of these is territoriality. And this is why you always see, take them to a neutral area and introduce them. Well, one of the things we know is that you have the resources you have to use to introduce dogs, and maybe you don't have a completely neutral area. If you do, fantastic. And I do want you to think about being creative about park situations, places that are fenced, places you can go to use. but it's not about always go to a neutral area. It's about thinking about why, and it's territoriality. So chances are the foster dog that you're bringing in, you don't really know much about, or maybe you do, but you're probably introducing the dog to your dog, who you may know a little bit more about. So if you know you have a dog who tends to be a little guardy, guards things that he likes and so forth, then, first of all, we need to work on that separately. But second of all, we just need to know that and not let it interfere with him meeting the other dog. So taking that trigger out of the picture. Now, we can reduce territorial behaviors. We may be able to eliminate them by having a neutral area. But some dogs will go to a neutral area and claim that as their own too. So we have to recognize that. So if you have a dog like this, and even if you don't, and even if you don't know, you have to make sure that you also don't have guardable items in that area. Like the humans that are involved have to know to step out of the way and not let a dog stand in front of them and guard them. And you have to scour the area and make sure there's not an old bone out there, a toy that some dog's going to start to guard. So it's just preparing the area. All right, the second one is preventing physical contact before everyone is ready. So we want to do our preparation work, and we want to make sure that the dogs are interested and all that before we let them have actual physical contact with each other. We also have to make sure that the humans are ready. So see-through fences are fantastic for this, and we're going to talk about see-through fences more later in the presentation. But see-through fences with prepared humans can really help dogs feel more secure, probably, in interacting, and also just limit that physical contact so there's no actual danger until everybody's ready. So the third one is be careful of unintentional forced contact. So what I'm talking about here is those narrow areas like doors and gates, for one, which are always a problem. Just living in your house with multiple dogs, we always have to watch out for doors and gates, because think about this, they're in a big old room together, or they're in the big old yard together, and all of a sudden they all go through the door together, and now they're squished together, and maybe they didn't realize that was going to happen, and whoa, and it causes everybody to get stressed and aroused, and it can cause a fight. So you have to be concerned about that in introducing dogs. And look at the area and predict those places where dogs could get behind something, and maybe they're not physically trapped, but they might be mentally trapped there. And if another dog walks in front of their one escape route, you could have a situation. So you just have to know about those things and plan for that unintentional forced contact when the dogs aren't ready. Number 4 is the potential for human error. And we should be able to eliminate that completely through planning, making sure that the humans involved have the skills they need, they're observant, they know what they're looking for, and we're communicating clearly. Are we ready to take the leashes off? No? Okay. That's super important. So communicate with your partner. And the last one is the arousal and stress levels of the dogs. So we always want calm, stress-free dogs in every situation, and in particularly here in introducing dogs, because a nervous, upset, frantic dog is not generally that attractive to the other dog to meet in some cases, and in other cases it gets the other dog all frantic and aroused, and now you've just got a bad situation. So we want to make sure that these dogs they've already had their exercise, they've had some mental stimulation, they're ready to be curious and interact, but they're not aroused, they're not asleep, but they've had some fulfillment, and they're not frantic and anxious and in need of exercise, because that's not what we're doing here. We're doing a thinking skill, so they have to be ready for that. So the humans have to keep the leashes loose, because in most cases there's going to be a leash component to this, and when there is, the humans have to keep the leashes loose. So what that means is, if you're letting dogs sniff each other, then the human at the end of the leash, as the dog approaches the other dog, the human has to move inward with them to keep that leash loose and resist tightening up that leash, because it makes you feel like you have more control, because what's happening then is you're increasing arousal and stress and potentially causing a bad association by that tightness on their neck as they're with the other dog. Clip-on leashes are best for this reason. A clip-on leash with a buckle collar or maybe even a harness, because there's not the risk of a slip lead accidentally tightening and, you know, causing that bad experience. Also with a clip-on leash, when the time is right, you can just drop them and they can drag them for a little bit until you actually take the leashes off. And there's not as much risk of a dog getting tangled in the leash and accidentally pulling that leash tight and causing a bad association. Leashes off is best when they're together, but there are situations where it's best to drop the clip-on lead and let them drag them for a little bit in case we need to go get the leash and say, come on, let's move over here for a little bit. And a slip lead is not best for that, because another dog could easily step on it and pull that leash and cause a problem. All right, so that's the end of our overview section, and we will stop for a minute and answer some of your questions before we move on to part 2.
We haven't received any questions yet.
What?
We haven't received any questions except for a request for a document.
Okay, awesome.
You mentioned a document about 5 minutes in.
Yeah, and
Is it on your
we can
website?
send that. It's on the computer. We'll send that after to
Okay.
everybody. Okay, so we don't really have any questions on that part, and that's understandable because it's really just getting started. So we're going to go on to part 2. We did see a request for the document with the links to the dog reading course, and so after we're done here, I will go and email that out to everybody that asked for it. And thanks for asking and wanting to really improve your skills and help these dogs succeed. So actually, what a great segue, because what we have to remember is we are working to make these dogs better pets in foster care, right? So I want to just mention, we're training dogs. We're not testing dogs. Testing dogs is not usually a good place to go, because first of all, researchers have been working for many decades to develop a test that can allow us to predict a dog's future behavior, and we have nothing. So it's not something we can do. We can't predict dogs' behavior. Now there are evaluations that we can do that can help us determine dogs' motivations and their suitability for different tasks and skills and training for different activities. But you are training these dogs as you're introducing them. So we never go into these things seeing what's going to happen. That's never a good idea. You are creating these dogs' future. You're creating their next experience with this dog and potentially with other dogs that they meet. You're training both these dogs you're introducing in their interaction behaviors. And so you want to succeed. So if our goal is these dogs will interact successfully, then we have to focus on reinforcing those behaviors that contribute to that goal and preventing the behaviors that don't lead to that goal, or, you know, lead in the opposite direction, right? So we're going to talk about that. And again, remember, we're asking dogs questions. We're setting up a situation and then saying, how are you doing now? Oh, not that great? Let's change it. You are doing great? Well, let's, you know, continue here, right? Both dogs have to want to interact. If either dog says no at any point, stop where you are, prevent a bad experience, and preserve your chance to try again in either a few minutes or later today, or maybe it's tomorrow, you know, depending on the dogs. So we definitely want to prevent all bad experiences and bad associations. And remember, those don't have to be fights. It's determined by the dog. Did he have a bad experience? Look at him, he'll tell you. All right, so we're going to talk about the behaviors that you want to reinforce, and the behaviors you don't want that you want to prevent. So the ones that are desirable for our goal are, it's really a fairly small number. First of all, you want a dog to be able to divide his attention among all the things that are going on. You don't want a dog that's fixated on the other dog. So we're looking for that dog to be able to, you know, look at the other dog and go, oh, there's a dog, cool, and then look back at you, be able to take a treat. That would be great. Look at the other things in the environment. Oh, there's a bird. That's a great scenario, because that dog is in the thinking part of his brain. He's solving problems. He's able to take in all the information that's available to him. When you have a dog that's fixated on the other dog and can't even pay attention to you, and remember from our last presentation, offering a dog a treat gives you information. Offer him a treat. He can't take a treat. He's like, no, get it away from me. I can only fixate on this dog. You're not in a good situation right then. So see what you can do to change that. Increase distance or, whatever it takes. We'll talk more about that. So you want a dog that can divide his attention between the other dog and you and all the other things that are going on. You want dogs to be sending calming signals to each other. When you watch when you do the dog reading course, you'll see stress signals, and there's kind of a subgroup of those that are calming signals. They're kind of related to stress. We won't go deeply into it, but basically what dogs are doing is sending a message to the other dog that, oh, you don't have to worry about me. I'm just minding my own business over here. And the two that are most common, that are the easiest to see, are turning their head away, which is also sometimes turns into turning their body away. So they'll look at the other dog and then they'll turn away, and then they'll look and then they'll turn away. The other one is sniffing the ground. So they'll just be like, oh, hey, and then they'll sniff the ground. They'll go, oh, you're still over there? Yeah, I'm going to sniff over here. And it's so cool when you look for those, because you'll see them go, oh, hey, good to see you. I'm just doing my thing. And the other dog will often do a calming signal back. So those are beautiful, and we want to encourage them. And we're going to talk in section 3 about a great way to encourage them. We also want to see friendly gestures. You all know what those are. It's the dog, it's related to turning away in some cases. So they kind of turn around and they look back over their shoulder. Hey, want to chase me? And it's that dancing around, exaggerated movements. They're not just walking. They're like, hey, they're happy, and they're moving their legs around. Soft faces, curved bodies. You want that curving spine. You never want straight and stiff, right? And you want bent elbows. Of course, play bows are one of our favorite friendly gestures, and that's the one where they're down on the ground with their chest and their butts in the air. So look at their elbows in that situation. They're bent. So you may see a play bow, but you may not. But you may see the lead-ins, which are those bending elbows. The dog just kind of dancing and bending their elbows. Bent elbows are a great sign of friendliness and ready for interaction. A widely wagging tail. So when you see that tail going, touching the side over here, touching the side over here, at a level that's, even with their spine, maybe slightly above, maybe slightly below, and a wide wag. If you see a circle tail, that's a universal friendly gesture. So those are the things you're looking for in them communicating to each other. And then there's one more I want to mention, and that's if one dog is super active and the other dog's like, whoa, it's a little too much for me, just politely moving away, not turning tail and walking in a straight line away from the other dog, and not cowering, but just like, I'm going to go over here, and then maybe moving over here, and like, I don't want to get too close right now because you make me nervous. That's super polite, and it's a great communication. So that's something we want to encourage in dogs that we want to interact. Okay, so now the undesirable behaviors. These are the ones that we want to prevent. Stop immediately and take a little break and let them start over again. We want to teach these dogs, you don't need to be doing these, you need to do those other ones. So lunging or bolting toward the other dog, even if it's friendly, even if it's because, oh my God, I want to play with you so bad, that's not okay. It's rude, and it can upset the other dog, and it's too aroused. Any face-forward approach, when dogs are successfully meeting, what you really want to see is those curving bodies like, hey, and turn over here, and maybe they get closer, and they sidle up, and they, sidling over to each other, being a little bit silly, interested but respectful is what you want. So no face-forward stuff, and we want to intervene there. It's rude at best, and it may be a big problem that we'll talk about later. Coming up on their rear legs is arousal. Don't want it. Lowered heads could be fear, could be predation. Don't want it. Start over. Head raised up high can be stress or aggression. Tucked tail is extreme fear. We'll talk about that later. And of course that high flagging tail that's stiff and wagging like this and maybe still. We don't want that. Stress, aggression is what that could mean. We don't want stiff bodies, squarely placed feet. We want them moving and dancing, remember, and sidling and turning and all that. No stillness. We, of course, don't want a wrinkled face or head. We don't want fast panting or a closed mouth. They should just be panting normally because they're being active, so it's a normal pant, but you don't want that frantic. And watch for the change there. If they're panting normally and then they close their mouth, just pay attention. It could be just, I need to pay a little more attention to this, or that could be a problem. And then, of course, lip licking, yawning, whale eyes we don't want, or that extreme focus on the other dog. They need to be able to divide their attention. So I'll tell you a little quick story about Mr. Al. Al, can you get up and come over here? Here, bud. I don't know if you can. He's too tired. So Al gets super excited when he's going to get to play with another dog, and he likes to really look at him. And so it is hard to get his attention turned back on me. But what I notice about him is he'll be looking at the other dog, but he's staying by me and he's controlling himself. And I can offer him a treat and he'll take it. So again, giving treats gives you information. If he didn't take the treat, I'd be like, whoa, okay, let's back up. So the other thing he can do is if I ask him to sit or I ask him to lie down in that situation, he can do it. He'll just keep looking at the other dog and he'll sit and he'll lay down. And then, I can get him to look at me. So that's okay. We don't need 100% perfection in this, but we need to just be able to recognize that we don't have, even though he's looking intently at the other dog, he's still focused on other stuff and he can manage himself. So it's going to be different in different situations. So that's why it's important for you to look at the overview and why we go about it this way. Okay, so that's the end of section 2. And we'll answer questions if y'all have any, and then we'll go to the last section of our talk today about introducing dogs.
So you have a question submitted about blind dogs, and if you have any advice on how you might handle the introduction differently if one of the dogs is blind.
Oh, wow. Okay, the question is about blind dogs and how you handle the introduction differently with blind dogs. So that's a really good question. So blind dogs and deaf dogs don't act right. To other dogs, they don't act right. If they went blind later in life, it might be a little bit better than if they had started out blind or deaf. Same thing. They just don't behave normally. Because why would they? Because they take in information in a different way than dogs that have all their senses, right? So we do have to pay careful attention to that. What plays a really big role, first of all, is association. We talked last time about how dogs learn through association and also through consequences. So if you have a blind dog and a seeing dog, for instance, you want to, and you can do association with both of them at the same time. Why would you not? But you definitely want to do association with the seeing dog. As the blind dog acts weird to him, you want to be giving him, oh, look at that dog acting weird. That's so cool. Isn't it great? Here's a treat. Oh, he acted weird again. Look at this treat. Oh, he came really close when maybe you weren't ready. Here's a treat. So you can use association to help the seeing dog really see that the blind dog is actually a good thing. When at first he might be going, why is he acting like that, right? So association is fantastic in a lot of situations. Also with deaf dogs, as they act weird, you associate that weirdness with good things, and that's the first step. So we'll stop there. We'll talk more if we need to.
No more questions.
Oh, so that's the only question. Okay, so yes, and I'm just going to throw in too, dogs that have 3 legs, dogs that walk funny, maybe they're older and they're stiff and they walk stiffly because they can't really prance. That makes it look to the other dog like they're being stiff and they're maybe not that friendly. So we really have to get in there and use association and help everybody be as relaxed and happy as they can be so we can have success. Now, the dogs do play a role, and dogs are smart, and they can figure things out, but we got to help them because it can also go bad. Super fat dogs are the same way. They walk funny, so think about that.
What about introducing cats to dogs? You don't have to address it if you don't want.
Introducing cats to dogs. We could talk about that all day because dear Al has had to meet a lot of cats in his life, and he's been very successful with some. It's taken a long time. He's still working on our oldest cat, mostly because the cat. So it's the same thing. You start with association. You start with, can y'all be, and actually we're going to address this a little bit in the next section. So you want to start with them at a distance where there's no reaction at all. What is that distance and what's that situation where they can both be kind of close together, whatever it is, even if it's 100 feet, where they can both have a good experience. And then you try to get it closer and you try to change it, continually associating that other animal with good things. So we can answer more about that after our next section. So let's go ahead and do that, because our next section is setting up situations. Now, I already told you it's not a cookbook, but we do have ideas for how to set up situations in which we can ask these animals the questions we need to ask them and really listen to their answers. So remember to take your time. You are building the future. You could be building your next 15 years. So take your time now and do it right. Like I said before, often there's some on-leash time that we spend at first. By the way, you do not have to go through every step. This is where you have to understand what you're looking for. Set up the situations, listen to the answers, and sometimes it goes really fast. Sometimes you can skip steps. Sometimes you need to have more steps and take multiple days. So it's all about reading the dogs. So when you're doing your on-leash stuff, what you want is boring, like I just explained. You got to have loose leashes. You can't have tight leashes. And you don't want any reactions at all. It may even seem like these dogs don't even know the other one's there. Trust me, they do know. So you want to carefully choose your distance to create that. To create that boring, we're just going for a walk and there happens to be another dog. Think about cats while we're talking about this too. Same thing. So there's two ways that we can walk. One is parallel walking. The other one is vertical walking. So with parallel walking, one of the easiest things to do if you live in a standard subdivision is just have one handler and dog on one sidewalk on one side of the street, the other handler and dog on the other sidewalk on the other side of the street. And you just position yourselves across from each other and you just go for a walk. You're just walking your dog, that guy's just walking his dog, you turn around, you walk some more. If you're doing well, you might move down to right next to the curb in the street, depending on your situation, but that's a general good distance to think about. And you want to focus on the walk, because during this process, what you're doing is associating the other dog with good things. You're making sure that you have that loose leash and you have those leash skills going so that you're not adding stress and arousal. And the dogs are just like, oh, hey, there's a dog. Can I have a treat? It's a beautiful training experience. So if they both want to sniff each other as you get a little closer, then you can allow that, certainly, but only for 3 seconds, because you don't want to go overboard. So let them sniff, move in to keep the leashes loose. 1001, 1002, 1003. Yay, that was great. Come over here. And you're creating them turning away from each other. So there's just success at every step there. And it's a beautiful thing. So focus on the walk. Let them sniff if they both want to and you're ready. And keep the leashes loose. And just say to yourself, doesn't matter. I don't care if y'all like each other. Because that keeps the pressure off the dogs. If we're doing vertical walking, that's just one dog's walking with a handler and the other dog's walking with a handler on the same path. It's not nose in your butt. That's not what we're going for. We're looking for that distance where they're in the same area, but they're okay dividing their attention. Oh, hey, there's a dog. I can take a treat, I can look at you, I can take in all the information. Again, if they're both interested, you can have a little sniff, move in with your loose leash, let them sniff for 3 seconds, and then call them away and say, yay, that was great. Don't stay so long that it causes a problem. Don't go to failure. All right, so now we want to talk about my favorite, which is meeting through a fence. And not that the leash walking is not great. You need it. You need it for that observation time. But when the dogs are meeting through a fence, one of the values is you can drop the leash or take it off. The dogs can actually, you can go to 5 or 10 seconds of interaction maybe at the fence, if it's good, and then you can call them away and create that beautiful turning away behavior, and then they're focused on you for a second. You're creating a great recall there too. And then they come to you, they can get a treat for coming, oh, you're so great, get a drink, make sure they're calm, and then reinforce that again with go back and visit the other dog. So it can be just positive on top of positive as they meet at the fence, have a good time, come away when you don't expect them to come from 10 feet. Go up there, call them away and back up. Yay, this is great. Have them be calm, let them go back to reinforce that great behavior. Let them have a good time, call them away again, and you're creating the play behavior that you want with that physical safety. So it's a great thing. So even with the fence, well, so let's go on to now it's time for, if you're having a great experience, and again, this could go really fast, you might be ready to just release them off leash into a big area. You want a lot of space. Again, you don't want to have a cramped space. What is a lot of space? It depends on the dog. The dogs define it. But plenty of space. You also want to see dogs giving each other space. You want to see them come together and then back up. Oh, hey, you want to chase me? Okay, want to wrestle a little bit? Okay, let's back up and I'll give you some space and you give me some space. So that's what you want. You don't want to just see a ball of dogs with no light between them. You want to take breaks often. Ideally, the best scenario is a good play session, take a break, a good play session, take a break, and repeat. And you can get that if you've done your preparation work and you're managing your play well. Don't drop your guard once the dogs are together. That's the most dangerous time. It's the time when some really bad things can happen, particularly if you're not paying attention and you're not taking those breaks. So it's super important because if you go to failure, then you go, oh darn, and I've done it. I was talking to Derek about this just the other day. I've done it. Oh, let's just go a little longer. Don't do it. Stop when everybody's having a good time. Take a break, and then if you want to have another session, do. Because if you go to failure, then you're starting your next introduction or play session in recovery mode. Now we have to recover from those bad experiences, and we don't have the option just to move forward because everything was good. So don't drop your guard. Okay, so we're going to talk about, oh, by the way, a break can be as simple as just the people walk up, get the dog's attention, pedal, oh, this is so great, and then let them play again. It could be that long. Or sometimes you need a longer break. You need the lawn chairs on the opposite sides of the yard. Come over here, maybe put the leash on, here's some treats, get some water, lie down, rest a little bit, and then, okay, we'll go play again. Okay, so I want to talk for a second about specific behaviors to watch for while the dogs are playing. So first of all, you may have heard that you have to have equality in the roles of chaser and chasee, who's on top when you're wrestling. That's not necessarily true. There's new research about that. You do have to have voluntary engagement. Both dogs have to be voluntarily into the play session. But some dogs just like to be chased all the time. They just want other dogs to chase them. Other dogs are the opposite. Some dogs are always on top in a wrestling session. Some dogs just fall over and go on the bottom. So it's okay as long as they're volunteering for that position, okay? If you think a dog is being a victim, do not hesitate to take a break. It's a great time to take a break. I'm not sure what's happening. I think maybe he's being victimized. Break him up, and what you want to do in that situation is take who you think the aggressor is away for a second and see what that victim dog does. Because sometimes the victim dog will come running back and go, hey, you stopped our game, we were playing. And that's awesome, so let him go play again. But it is always right to ask, because sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes it's like, thanks, and then you have to make a new plan. All right, so I want to talk about our last topic is those yellow alert and red alert behaviors that you really have to be aware of. So the yellow alert behaviors are, you have to take a break when you see minimal space between dogs for an extended period of time. Like I was saying, you want come together, separate, come together, separate. If you're just seeing a ball of dogs with no light between them, that's not a good thing. Take a break. A dog puts his head across the other dog's back. Take a break. Dogs come up on their rear legs. Take a break. That's arousal. One dog puts one or both front paws on the other dog's back. You know what that is? That's the beginning of mounting. Take a break. So what mounting is, by the way, in most cases it's conflict. Oh, I don't know, I don't have any very good skills, I don't know what to do, I'm going to just do this. But it's rude, and you don't want to leave that up to the dogs to work out. You want to get in there and take a break. It can also be sexual, particularly with younger dogs, but mostly it's conflict. And then anytime speed or arousal increases, you need to take a break. So when you have that thing where they're chasing and they're just chasing around and around the yard, and all of a sudden it just gets faster and faster, you need to step in and separate them. If you see any arousal behaviors, hackles up, any stress signals from either dog, and that's what the coming up on the rear legs is, take a break. And you may be able to resume later or tomorrow, but you need a break right then. So then here's our red alert behaviors. These mean you have to stop and take a break, and it might be a permanent break. We're not sure. A tucked tail is extreme fear. When a dog tucks its tail all the way under, that's extreme fear. They're not thinking, they're just reacting, and they can't handle themselves, and they can't handle the situation. You have to stop. When you see bullying, this may look like herding behavior, where there's a dog kind of behind something or in a corner, and the dog's like, keeping him there when he's trying to get out. It can be, they don't even have to touch. It can just be that one dog is clearly communicating, back off, back off, back off, and the other dog's not. You've got a bullying situation. You have to stop. Taking that a little further, when a dog rolls another dog, which means they hit the other dog with their chest with enough force to roll them over, or they can do it with their side too. They can kind of come with their side and bash them with their side as they're coming by and roll the other dog. That's aggression. It doesn't involve teeth, but it's aggression, and the play has to stop, and those two dogs might not ever be able to play together. But they might, I don't want to say never, but it's going to take some work. And then the final one I want to mention is fairly uncommon, but it's predatory behavior. And it takes different forms, but it's very focused behavior. It involves moving straight forward toward another dog, usually a smaller dog. Sometimes the head is down, but it looks unlike any play behavior, and it's not play, it's feeding behavior, and it's not safe, and those dogs can't play together anymore. So, and then one final little quickie, since we're talking about springers here, this may not be as big of a deal, but a good rule of thumb is that dogs should be within 20 pounds of each other to have a safe play session. Great Danes playing with Chihuahuas is just never a good idea. So that's all I have, and I'm ready to answer your questions about introducing dogs.
Okay, we have two questions queued up. The first one is about introducing dogs, but then it has a related follow-up, and that is, what if you're the only handler? And then the follow-up question was, do you skip the walk, which I assume means do you try to walk more than one dog that has just been introduced at a time if you're the only person? But the primary question was, what if you're the only handler?
So the question is, if you're the only handler and you want to introduce two dogs, then my response is get another person to help you. It's not safe. You could potentially do an introduction through a fence. Perhaps you have a neighbor that can put their dogs up, and you can use their yard, put one dog in their yard and one dog in your yard, let them meet through the fence, and you could be there to monitor. You could switch sides, and then you're safe. I don't think it's safe for a single person to introduce two dogs for the first time. I don't. I wouldn't walk two dogs together, because if you've got a leash in each hand and the dogs tangle, you're out on the street. There's too many bad things that can happen. Surely you have a friend. Get somebody else in Springer Rescue to come help you.
Okay. How much time might it take for the dogs to get comfortable with one another? How long do you have to keep them apart?
How much time might it take for two dogs to get comfortable with each other, and how long do you have to keep them apart? So maybe 5 minutes, maybe 5 months. Of course that's impossible to answer, but here's what you want to look for. First of all, just because you introduced them one time and it was successful, you never want two dogs to be forced to be together 24/7. You always want dogs to have some private time. Private time with you, because they deserve that one-on-one to develop themselves. They can have time together. You want to feed them separately, of course, so maybe they have chew bone time or feeding time separately. Certainly at first they sleep separately. So it's more like over time they can spend more and more time together as you've monitored how they're working with each other, and you know that you're constantly seeing friendly gestures and you're seeing them giving up space to each other. That's super key. And you're seeing them use those calming signals. Then at that point, you can just let them be together. But even then, I'm a big fan of making sure the dogs have time by themselves and time by themselves with you. So I guess the answer is, it can happen really fast. Dogs that have already had good experiences with other dogs and are pretty stress-free, they can get together really quick and live happily ever after. And with other dogs, you just read their behavior and just keep asking them the questions.
Okay, when you say take a break, do you mean call them away or take the leash and physically separate them?
So the question is, when I say take a break, do I mean call them away or take the leash and physically separate them? Which is a good question. It's a little of both, because chances are this new foster dog doesn't have a great recall with you, because you probably might have just met him. Maybe he does, and that's ideally what we want, is the dogs are playing together and we can call them and they come to us and say, yay, and we go, that was so great, now go back and play. That's what kind of our ultimate goal is, right? But at first, we probably have to work that a little bit. So we want to get in close. We want to kind of reach in and go, oh, come here, puppy, come on, and see if we can get them to turn and come to us. Once they've turned away from the other dog, we might be able to, touch their collar or pick up the leash if they're dragging it and lead them away. Now, I will never talk about pulling a dog on a leash. You can take that as an always. Never pull them on the leash, but certainly encourage them around. Come on, and then lead them away is probably what it's going to look like.
Okay, if everyone seems to be getting along okay, do the dogs still need breaks? Sometimes behavior changes after a little while.
So the question is, if all the dogs are getting along together, do they still need breaks? So I'm thinking this has a lot of different scenarios involved. I'm going to say, certainly in your first introduction, you need breaks. Maybe in the first week or two, until you're really familiar with this new dog and your dog in a lot of different scenarios, like maybe when they are a little bit more crazy and active, That's different from when they're super rested and super calm, right? They're different dogs at that time. So you need to look at that situation separately. When one just went to the vet and came back, you may need some more breaks in that situation. But over time, chances are you don't need as many breaks. And especially if the two dogs, because dogs do have a role in this, like I said, they're learning about each other too. I never want to give the responsibility of training a dog to another dog, because that's not usually a good idea. But once I've guided it a little bit and then seen how it's working out, then they're going to tweak things. They're going to learn their own little getting along language with each other, and then you don't have to take as many breaks. However, if the day comes when the dogs are playing in the yard and you see one of these yellow alert behaviors, then yes, you definitely do need to take a break, and you need to note that, and potentially their next play session, you might want to take a break while things are going well, because you've noted that something went bad. So does that make sense? It's a situational thing, and I know I don't want to just answer everything with it depends on the dogs, but hopefully that's a little guidance to kind of picture what might happen.
Okay, so if you've done your introduction walks, that all went okay. They're in the house, in the yard, but then they growl at each other when they get near each other. What do you do?
Then you take a break. Growling is a yellow alert behavior.
They didn't hear the question.
I'm sorry. Let me repeat the question. So the question is, your walks went well, they're hanging out in the house and the yard, and then when they get close to each other, somebody growls. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. So growling would be a yellow alert behavior. Chances are, if they growl, I'm going to say you missed something along the way. And I'm going to say that your walks and their being together might not have been going as well as you had thought, and you need to back up and really look at what's going on and get better at reading dog behavior. That's my guess. But immediately you separate the dogs, you take a break, and potentially you don't start again until tomorrow and you have a better plan.
Okay, did I already ask you how much time it may take for the dogs to get comfortable with each other? Okay, then the next one is, do you always take the leashes off, or is there value in leaving a trailing leash on a dog when you're still in the assessment stage? Like if they're in the house together or whatever.
Yes. So the question is, do you always take the leashes off, or is there a value in leaving a trailing leash? Yes, there is a value in leaving a trailing leash. And I think this question might be pulling in the period of assessing the dog in other areas too. But so answering in both ways. First, about the introduction, just based on how the dogs are acting, if there's any reason to think, and it's always perfectly safe to just drop that leash, particularly if it's a clip leash, for both dogs, just for that first time that they're loose in the yard together, because it just gives you a handle. You can step forward and step on a leash and grab it and pull it up and try to keep it loose, and and break dogs up in case something were to go bad. And even if you do everything right, yes, you could end up with growling or a fight. I don't mean to think that, I don't mean to act like you can't, but we want to focus on having that not happen, of course. So there's a value in a leash there. And then when you're talking about just getting started right with a dog, which was our previous presentation, I'm a fan of dogs having a leash on all the time in the house when they're new. Because I don't know this dog. Is he going to go straight for the garbage, or go drink out of the toilet, or run off in the corner and pee, or I need that dog near me on a leash because I want to be shaping his future. So for that reason, definitely. And there's a benefit if you're having the dogs interact in the house, certainly, to having a leash on, because chances are there's more furniture in there, more nooks and crannies for them to get into and behind, and there might be even more reason to use the leash and call them away, hey, come over here, and separate them. So all kinds of value to dropping the leash. The only reason I said it's always better to have the leashes off is because that eliminates the human error of humans accidentally pulling on the leash, or a dog stepping on the leash, or them getting tangled up. So in that respect, it's better for them to be off when they're playing, but there are other reasons to have them on.
Last question I have submitted, it's borderline, but can you explain how to rotate dogs to give them alone time or time with the human?
Yeah, so somebody asked, can you talk about rotating dogs to give them alone time and time with the human? And yeah, when you have multiple dogs in the house and one or more of them is new, and this kind of goes back to starting out right with your new foster dog, having that plan ahead of time of where each individual dog's confinement area is going to be. Are you fortunate enough to have a room for each one of them to have their bed in and where they eat and so forth, and where it's easy to get them in there and have them where they don't have to look at the other dogs when they're in their confinement area. That of course is ideal, and yes, not everybody has that. So do you have crates in a room and you need to put a sheet over them? And then, so when you're rotating dogs, it's super important to not accidentally be introducing dogs when you're trying to rotate them. So what that looks like is, kind of again, going back to starting out right, the leash goes on before the dog comes out, and the other dog goes in and the door closes before the second dog comes out. Because you don't want accidental introductions that you can't monitor and you can't control when you're not ready. Even when dogs know each other really well, I can't believe I didn't mention this, but when I talk about no face forward approaches, one of the images that comes to my mind is when you go up to a dog park. So this is the dog park I'm not going to go to. You walk up to the first gate of the dog park, and what you see is 15 dogs all standing at the gate facing your dog, and the owners are all way back in the park. So I'm not opening the gate and letting my dog in there. My dog does not want to approach another dog face forward. That's a threat. So with dogs in our homes, we always want to be avoiding that also. So it's only fair to the dog to manage the dog such that when they walk out of their crate or walk out of their room, there's not another dog right there and they're walking right into his face. Because not only is that dangerous, they could have a bad experience, it could start a fight, all that. It's not fair to either dog, and you're not setting up their future very well. So when you're rotating dogs, you put the first dog up, you get the second dog out, you take that one out, you do their little training session or have their walk or play or go in the yard or whatever, put that dog up, close them up, give them their treat, or their chewy, then you go get the other dog and bring it out. So it's just moving them in such a way that you don't have accidental situations come up that you can't control. Because if you're not controlling the environment, then you're not controlling the dogs. And if you do control the environment, you don't have to control the dogs. It's already set up for them to succeed.
No more questions?
Okay, great. That was the last question. And so whoever asked in the comments for that document about with the links to take the dog reading course, we'll send that to you shortly. And I sure appreciate personally everybody's wanting to learn more about dog behavior, because that's really what dogs are made of. And when we can understand that better, wow, can we make their lives better. So thank you all so much for listening, and I look forward to another session later. Bye.